This video was sponsored by Manscaped.
Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, Ethan.
Tom's timing had to be perfection.
I was nervous.
When most people think of Mission Impossible nowadays, they almost certainly think of the movies. They think of that iconic theme song or Tom Cruise. Or if you want to go a bit further, Tom Cruise doing all sorts of crazy stunts. But Mission Impossible is actually very old. 58 years old, in fact. Starting as a series that ran from mid-1966 to early 1973, with a short revival period from 1988 to 1990. Paramount had attempted to capture this spy thriller in cinematic form for years, originally floating the idea of a revival with the show's cast back in 1985, and constantly trying to refloat the format from there. But there just never was a strong enough idea anyone was particularly confident in.
While audiences were still laughing at Tom Cruise in scenes like this, Tom hit it big again with his starring role in All the Right Moves.
One Happy New Year!
Winner is Tom Cruise. Born on the 4th of July!
Thank you.
After having achieved major success with Top Gun and early 90s hit The Firm, Cruise formed a new production company.
That's where I met my partner after I did TAPS, Paula Wagner. My agent, my partner, Paula Wagner. And, we just formed this company.
Named CW Productions, saying he wanted to create a film company that would give him the opportunity to develop and work on a wider range of films, some of which he would act in or direct. Keen to keep him on their side, Paramount desperately searched for a series to attach him to retain him, fearing they'd lose him due to his success. And luckily for them, Mission Impossible grabbed his interest.
We just set up shop at Paramount Pictures, and Tom said, they have Mission Impossible, one of my most favorite things, let's do it.
It's asking to be made, I felt, into a feature film.
I said, great idea, Tom, and we started developing the scripts.
I just thought it could be a lot of fun playing this guy. I mean, a guy who speaks many different languages, can assume many different identities, a character that uses his wits to get out of situations and force if it need be.
Now that Cruise had agreed to take this on, it was time to find the director, and the director Cruise selected came from a chance meeting. Spielberg lived down the street from me, and I would often go and have dinner, just he and I, Cruise said. We would go and just talk about movies.
And I would often get him to screen one of his movies, and then we'd talk about it.
I remember one night I went over and there was Brian Depalma, and so the three of us had dinner. And we were just talking about movies, and there's Brian, and I'd seen all of his films. And I went home that night. Mission was on my mind. Also, I was prepping Interview with the Vampire at that time. And I went home that night and I stayed up for about 14 hours and I just got all of De Palma's movies and I restudied all of them. I just went, oh my gosh, he's got to direct Mission Impossible.
So what does Brian De Palma do then? What do you do? Where do you go? What do you say? Do you want to hide? Do you want to go away for a year? What do you want to do?
Being in the right place at the right time. Mike Owens called me up and said, "You interested in doing Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise?" I said, "Are you kidding? Of course."
I was really excited when Brian said he wanted to direct this movie. An opportunity to work with him and see what kind of movie he made.
De Palma was an interesting choice as he was very much an auteur and not a hired hand as a director. His record included films such as The Untouchables, Casualties of War, and Carlito's Way. In De Palma's words, a movie is a work of art. It either exists and people keep looking at it, or it vanishes. So I have very little to do with it, and the movie has basically got to find its own way. And many of my movies, people are still looking at 30 or 40 years later. So I guess there's some value in it, because they've existed through the ages. And speaking of finding its own way, for Mission Impossible, De Palma wanted to do just that. much to the dismay of the original cast, he decided that the first thing we have to do is kill off the whole team. The film would continue the continuity of the original show, but wipe out its protagonists and start fresh.
You don't want to lose what's attractive about the television material. On the other hand, you want to do something that's new and different.
Martin Landau, who played Agent Roland Hand in the original series, was not a fan of their original plans, saying, "They wanted the entire team to be destroyed, done away with one at a time, and I was against that."
He would also continue to complain about the film's tone, saying that
it was basically an action-adventure movie and not Mission. Mission was a mind game. The ideal mission was getting in and getting out without anyone ever knowing we were there. So the whole texture changed. Why volunteer to essentially have our characters commit suicide? I passed on it. I said, it's crazy to do this. The script wasn't that good either.
Wake up, Claire! Jim's dead! They're dead! They're all dead!
Ultimately, Depalma got his way.
But in a different way. Rather than killing the characters off, they were just left in the temporal dust.
The only character that appears both in the movie and in the TV series, which will be recognizable to old Mission Impossible fans, is Jim Phelps,
whose original actor, Peter Graves, refused to reprise his role after finding out that the character
would turn out to be a traitor and get killed off at the conclusion of the film.
The plot point continued, but with actor Jon Voight replacing Graves, who said that, "I am sorry that they chose to call him Phelps. They could have solved that very easily by either having me in a scene in the very beginning or reading a telegram from me saying, 'Hey boys, I'm retired, gone to Hawaii, thank you, goodbye, you take over now.' So Mission Impossible began anew, in a way its old timers weren't too pleased about, but begin it did nonetheless."
I would have to say that, my Jim Phelps borrows something from the original, and then the new one takes its shape in the pick piece. It's like the birth of a new team.
Operative 207, you have been assigned to a new mission. Should you choose to accept, you will take on the identity of Oil Baron Salvo Karlowski.
I accept.
You also need to remove that ridiculous mustache. Be careful with that. The fake blood alone from those masks costs a fortune. Our sponsor Manscaped has provided all you need to tame that mustache and more. With the Beard Hedger, which features titanium-coated T-blades and a zoom wheel with 20 adjustable settings, you can quickly get that mustache right off. It's also waterproof if you get into any wet situations. Next up is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Complete with skin-safe blade heads that feature longer, wider, and rounded teeth that cut our hair easily while being gentle on your skin, allowing you to trim anywhere you want. Though for this mission you don't need to. Oh, well, never mind then. And with Father's Day right around the corner, this makes for a perfect gift as well. Manscaped has a 30-day money-back guarantee, which means you can try this package risk-free. Bundle up for the save, or grab whichever tool Dad needs, or your mission needs most. Get ready for your mission today with 15% off your entire order with the Beard and Balls bundle using the code Voyager. Now, get back out in the field, Agent. You don't need the mask just yet.
The script ultimately went through 2 different drafts that were rejected before Depalma decided to bring in a 3-man band to finish the job. Writers Steve Zalian, David Koepp, and Robert Towne. Koepp was fired midway through the production, but would eventually be brought back on because of issues with the dialogue. This chaotic management meant that the crew essentially went into pre-production without a concrete script. Depalma had all the action sequences lined up, but according to Towne, neither he nor David Koepp were satisfied with the story that caused these action sequences to take place. One particular element of the script that was cut out included a love triangle between Ethan Hunt, Jim Phelps, and Phelps' wife. But they got a certain bit of outside advice from none other than George Lucas, who criticized it as taking audiences out of the movie because it was out of the genre, as he would put it. To unclog the narrative, Towne would work with Depalma and Cruise on late nights to iron things out until they reached a point where Koepp felt that they had set the bar pretty high. Lastly, they would bring in composer Alan Silvestri to work on the score. Everything seemed to be going quite well during the recording session, but Silvestri would receive a phone call that Paramount had canceled the rest of his scoring sessions, essentially being fired. It was said that he had been fired only after he created around 20 minutes of the score. Of course, this is according to rumors, but they would quickly hire a new composer, Danny Elfman, to take his place, who Tom Cruise had liked from the film To Die For, a film his wife, Nicole Kidman, had starred in. But unfortunately for Danny Elfman, he only had a few weeks to finish the score, as Tom Cruise had fired Silvestri during post-production. He would incorporate music from the original theme from Mission Impossible and some of what Elfman had composed. During this process, band members from U2 would also be brought in, Larry Mullen and Adam Clayton, who loved the original show and the theme. Together, they would create a couple different variations of what we now know as the theme for Mission Impossible. In an odd twist of fate for Danny Elfman, he too would get booted out in the second film after signing on to compose it. And the composer that replaced him? Why, Hans Zimmer, of course. But that's a story for the next video. Principal photography would begin in March 1995 in the city of Prague.
We were one of the first major American films to go to Prague in this new and show contemporary Prague, which is a beautiful, mysterious city.
Depalma convinced Cruise to film in Prague for the opening sequence because of the beauty of the city and the fact that the studios had rarely filmed there for major motion pictures. And that made sense to a point. Prague had been under the rule of first Nazi Germany from 1938 to 1945, and then came under the control of the Soviets as a satellite state of sorts as part of the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic from 1948 to 1989, before finally gaining their independence in 1989 during the Velvet Revolution.
Czechoslovakian citizens took the streets to demand the communist regime to liberalize the country, call for free elections, and let other political forces participate.
Which saw a peaceful transition for Czechoslovakia to a democracy. So in a way, it makes sense why a place like Prague would not have been included in many major Hollywood productions up until this point, but it was not without its issues. On May 9th, 1995, the New York Times would publish a story about the production running into issues of being overcharged. The initial quote of shooting at the Liechtenstein Palace of $2,000 a day exploded to $23,000 a day, just before they were about to start filming. The government officials refused to go back to the original price they had agreed on before. We were disappointed that this kind of situation occurred because it unfortunately hinders future filmmaking in the city, would say Tom Cruise's business partner, Miss Wagner. The chief of government office in Prague would push back on this, saying that the Americans were at fault and they never actually agreed on the original price. But one English writer for the Czech Daily News Digest Fleet Sheet, Eric Best, said, "The disturbing thing about the Tom Cruise affair is that few Czechs get the point. They, even now, consider it their unalienable right to take advantage of foreigners, and they consider it the utmost effrontery for someone, especially one of the foreign devils himself, to point out their errant ways." The president of the Czech Republic, Václav Havel, finally made a statement about the whole ordeal, saying that the government official involved didn't understand the idea of indirect profit and the tourism boost that this would provide for the region. Interestingly enough, Rick McCallum and George Lucas would take offense at this story published in the New York Times, as they believed it was a hit piece backed by Paramount against filming in Prague, as they themselves had nothing but good things to say about filming there for the series Young Indiana Jones. Over the years, whatever the misunderstanding here was, it doesn't seem that this kept Tom Cruise from returning to film there in the future. In addition to filming in Prague, they would also film in Pinewood Studios, London, and Scotland. And while Apple TV Plus was not around to make their own films in the 90s, Apple would pay to be part of the series to the tune of $15 million for promotion alongside the film, after suffering massive setbacks financially as a company during this time. It was trying to stage a comeback, and for this film, they would include their Apple laptop models that they hadn't even released yet, and according to some, didn't even really turn on yet.
You may want to pick up the book.
Cinematographer Stephen Burham would be brought on as the director of photography for the film. He and Depalma had worked together on several different projects and films over the years. I love working with Brian. He's the greatest. He knows exactly what he's doing. There is not much dialogue between us on the set. The collaboration is not artsy at all, but very matter of fact. I have an expression that I use, Depalma left and right. If Brian says the frame ends at a certain point, it's going to end there. There's no reason to shoot anything past that point. For the film, as it was still nearly 6 to 7 years before early digital cinema cameras would make their way onto the scene, they would utilize film cameras, specifically the Panavision Panaflex Platinum. Steven would employ several different notable techniques throughout the film, techniques like the split diopter, Dutch angles, and according to him, incredibly sharp anamorphic lenses. Steven spoke to how he accomplished this, saying, "Many people ask me why my anamorphic shows look so sharp. It's because I know which stop to put the lenses at. You can't get an anamorphic lens below T4 and keep it sharp. In desperate situations, I have shot scenes at T2.8, and I've been able to get away with it because I light very hard and very contrasty, which gives the images a phony sharpness. But if you try to light an anamorphic image at T2.8 with a soft light, the image will have no snap." And when they were filming in Prague for a sequence at night, it required a massive effort to light the area, with the director of photography saying that they had to light 2 miles of riverfront on either side of the bridge. We ended up carefully placing 450 IK par lights to duplicate the architectural lighting. You can see here the map of the lighting setup, with lights strategically positioned for each building within the scene. Down here is the floating barge they set up to also light the scene from the water. It is also reported that they would use a barge to float along a massive fog machine along the river and the lake to create a dense, thick fog. But they would face inevitable issues with Mother Nature when trying to accomplish this, dealing with snow, then rain, and then a strong wind that would push the fog away. It took us 3 nights to set lights, and we had 20 walkie-talkies for the electrical department alone, Steven recalled. "We went against every ounce of common sense, but we persevered and succeeded. We came out about a day ahead of schedule." Mission Impossible, while being the first of many movies, was an impressive showcase of stunt work, in isolation, showing a range of tools, tricks, and danger. Many stunts in the movie are impressive for different reasons. Some are just plain dangerous, while others must have been incredibly straining for Tom Cruise and the stuntmen on set. And the first major stunt the director wanted Tom Cruise to be in was this fish tank scene.
And he said 1, and 2, that tank blew behind me. I just had to keep saying to myself, stay there. I mean, I could feel the glass hitting the back of my legs, and I had this coat on the back of my coat, and I could feel the water coming around. I'm thinking, 3, man, 3, where's 3, where's 3? Bam, I hear the thing explode above me, and I was gone.
Tom Cruise had convinced the studio executives over at Paramount to give them a bit more money for, as Cruise described it, big, showy action piece that would increase the budget by almost $10 million. And while it's not clear if this scene was the one that Cruise fought to get that extra budget for, it at least was part of that ask for an increase. The whole setup was Tom Cruise's idea for the ridiculous glass-walled restaurant with massive fish tanks everywhere, even overhead. In total, there were 16 tons of water on the set, and they had them set to detonate, making the director worry that the glass would fly around too much and injure someone.
He's sitting there waiting to get through this glass plate with this right above him, this, tons of water that's going to come cascading down from above him and behind him. Enough to literally, wash you into next week.
They would shoot the scene initially with a stuntman, but the director felt that it didn't look convincing enough and decided to have Tom Cruise attempt the stunt, even with the threat of exploding glass and the possibility of drowning in the massive amount of water being set loose.
1, 2, 3!
Beyond this stunt scene, before we get to the one that was done both practically and through VFX, we have the infamous and memeable wire scene. Beyond the great wire work on display, the one interesting detail we could pull from this scene is that Tom Cruise would utilize British pound coins in his shoes to act as counterweights to allow him to balance properly while doing this scene.
I went down to the floor and I kept hitting my face, hitting my face, and the take didn't work. And we were running out of time. We had a lot we had to do. So I went up to the stunt guys and I said, give me, coins. Here in England, they have pound coins. So I put pound coins in and I hung on the cables to see was I level.
Moving into the world of digital effects in the 90s is always a fun treat, and nothing more fun than the removal of the face mask scene.
My forte is realism, to pass the closest of scrutiny, where I could walk up to you 6 inches and talk to you, and you wouldn't know I had a silicone mask on.
Honestly, this trick is pulled off beautifully in this film, and it's a simple quick cut of 2 plates, one of the actor and his real face, and the other of the mask being pulled off by Tom Cruise. Yet there was one thing that was truly impossible to shoot for Mission Impossible: that train sequence. While Tom Cruise is known for doing as many stunts as he can himself, it would have been madness or potentially even attempted murder to let him jump around on a real moving bullet train, moving at hundreds of miles per hour, crossing different landscapes and entering a tunnel. It would have taken only a second of inattention for Cruise's career to result in a premature end. There were 2 options: either slow down the sequence and make it safer for everyone involved, or keeping it looking really fast and compromising in some other way. Tom Cruise really wanted to use the high-speed rails in France for this stunt. When they were turned down, Depalma would look around to try and find another suitable location for the sequence. But Tom Cruise, being Tom Cruise, wined and dined the people running the high-speed rail in France, and the next day they were given permission to film. Unfortunately, even though they were finally given permission to film it, the track itself ended up being unavailable for the specific time they needed it. So Depalma would decide to shoot the exterior on the Glasgow Southwestern line and move the stunt sequence to Pinewood. The now defunct magazine Cinefex gives us a great deep dive into the creation of this sequence. The team was zealous, wanting to achieve a convincing looking scene that topped any other train-related action sequence up to that point. It was decided that nothing would be better than a VFX composite. George Hull noted on Cinefex, their goal was to have the train sequence top other action sequences in terms of speed and excitement. By creating it in a digital environment, we could place the actors in dangerous situations that would otherwise be impossible. The people who would supervise the shoot were John and Thomas Knoll, for which Tom Cruise had to climb around on a train cart while being blasted with strong winds. If you don't know who Thomas and John Knoll are, they happen to be the creators of Photoshop, pioneers in the world of digital art, and together with their team, they had only one goal, which was one-upping the rest of the industry with this train sequence.
In real time, this whole action that we're trying to capture now is taking place in about a quarter of a second. And I'm trying to get just under 1 second of screen time out of it.
The entire segment was shot against a blue screen on the massive 007 soundstage in Pinewood, and the wood and fiberglass train cart wasn't just fixed in place. It could also be detached and moved around. Multiple challenges laid in the artist's path, from simulating the winds to marrying different plates of materials to getting all the lighting correct. There was a lot to perfect, and equally as much to mess up on. While for color reference, the solution was relatively simple, just moving the train cart out onto the parking lot and taking pictures for reference. Other solutions needed a little more creativity. The lighting within the tunnel, for instance, needed to be simulated somehow, as the train cart would remain still on set. For this, the team built a light rig that would repeat the same overhead lights over and over and over again. The final composite, the moving lights of the studio shoot, would be synchronized with the interval of reappearing lights above the train in the background plates, making it harder to spot what is real and what is fake. For the strong winds, multiple solutions were brainstormed, from various types of fans to even a kerosene-powered jet engine, which was ruled out due to the production of dangerous fumes. So either the Windmaker was unhealthy and dangerous in the long run, or it was not powerful enough for the effect Tom Cruise wanted, which is where the team looked into skydiving simulators, which were so powerful that the winds could contort people's faces and make clothes violently flutter. The most amazing aspects of the visual effects at work is how seamlessly they blend into the scene. Landscapes whiz past at high speeds, the actors were seemingly illuminated by their surroundings, lingering shots of the environments to the left and to the right of the train. You'd be forgiven to think that a significant portion of the image was real. This could in part be attributed to most of this material actually being shot for real. With digital effects capabilities having been limited, it was difficult to get photoreal results without using some kind of photography, making the landscapes real yet fake. Principal filming would wrap around August of 1995, with the film being delivered under budget and on time. There were rumors, of course, that Cruise and director Depalma ended up not getting along. but that's never really been confirmed in any substantial way that we could find. But though this film was set up to have a sequel and would go on to be a massive success at the box office, Depalma was not interested in returning to direct, and it would take a lot longer than anticipated to return to Mission Impossible. And you can hear that story and the crazy production of Mission Impossible 2 right here.